Philadelphia had one of the greatest baseball franchises ever, 8 pennants and 5 world championships, as well as one of the worst, as this team had a tendency to wallow in the second division outside of those 8 years when it wasn't competing for the pennant. And I'm talking about the Philadelphia Athletics. Indeed, in 1954, when the Athletics stunned the baseball world by announcing that they were moving to Kansas City, many people in Philadelphia said that we were losing the wrong baseball team. So what happened? How did Philadelphia gain one of the most successful franchises in the early days of the American League and then lose it? Well, stay tuned, because I'll tell you the story of the rise and then fall of the Philadelphia Athletics. Philadelphia Baseball History presents the rise and fall of the Philadelphia Athletics. You like the shirt? Because you could get a design like this or one of our other designs at our merch store. Just use the link in the description box below and help our channel out. Thanks. So let's talk about Cornelius McGillicuddy, or Connie Mack for short. A former catcher from the National League, Mack was managing the Milwaukee Brewers of the Western League when league president Ban Johnson harbored ambitions to turn the league into a rival major league. He tapped Mack, no, not that one. Yeah, that one. He tapped Mack to head the franchise placed in Philadelphia, the Athletics. Mack would own 25% of the team. He recruited sporting goods magnate Ben Scheib to own 50%. The remaining 25% would be owned by sports writers Frank Hugh and Sam Jones. Mack enticed players such as Phillies hitter Nap Lajoie to jump leagues with the prospects of higher salaries. Even an injunction obtained by Phillies owner Colonel John Rogers could not prevent the A's from winning the 1902 pennant and repeating that feat in 1905. Connie Mack had made friends nationwide in the baseball world. He was known for his ability to use his network of contacts to find quality players. In the early days of the American League, that talent included Hall of Famers Lajoie, Elmer Flick, Rube Waddell, and Shoeless Joe Jackson. The first great A's dynasty that brought 3 world championships to Philadelphia between 1910 and 1914 included such future Hall of Famers as Eddie Collins, Frank Home Run Baker, Charles Albert Chief Bender, and Gettysburg Eddie Plank. Still, Mack learned a painful lesson from that first dynasty team, and that is, teams that win multiple championships aren't as profitable as you might expect, particularly in Philadelphia. While the A's attracted most fans in the American League in 1910 and 1911, by 1914, the A's found themselves in 5th place in American League attendance, despite winning the World Series that year. The situation was exacerbated by 2 things. In 1913, Hugh and Jones sold their shares to Mack, making him an equal partner with Ben Scheib. Mack and Scheib had an amicable relationship, and Mack even borrowed the money to pay for the shares from Ben Scheib. But while Connie Mack incurred debt to buy shares in the team, a new baseball league, the Federal League, came on the scene in 1914 in an attempt to compete with the National and American Leagues. Starting a new league, however, involves a lot of money. The Federal League owners found themselves in deep debt, particularly after filing and then losing a lawsuit against the American and National League. That lawsuit, by the way, was initially heard by one judge, Kennesaw Mountain Landis. And that's the case that led to the Supreme Court recognizing an antitrust exemption for professional baseball. At any rate, Major League owners bought out some of the Federal League owners, allowed some of the Federal League owners to buy out Major League franchises, and allowed 2 Federal League franchises to simply fail. And with Mack experiencing tightening finances, attendance dwindled. Mack sold off his star players one by one. By 1915, the A's found themselves in last place, even with the return of Nap Lajoie. And that's where they stayed until 1921. Indeed, it wasn't until 1925 that the A's emerged from the second division, and that is, those teams that finished in the bottom 4 of the American League. During that period, Ben Scheib died, and he left his shares to his 2 sons, Tom and John. Mack remained close with the Scheib family and even purchased 141 shares after John's death in 1937 to become the majority owner of the A's. And unlike other owners in baseball, Mack derived his income solely from his ownership of the A's, which meant that his personal finances were tied to that of the team. To climb out of the mediocrity of the early 1920s, Mack again relied on his network of friends and colleagues across the baseball world to help him recruit talent. Frank Home Run Baker, for example, had become a manager in the Eastern Shore League. This was a minor league that was comprised of teams from Maryland. In the 1920s, Baker contacted his former manager in order to tell him about this young, talented catcher that was on Baker's team. This catcher had the skill to play in the major leagues. And this is how Connie Mack found Jimmy Fox, the A's answer to Babe Ruth. Similar connections led to the A's discovering Mickey Cochran and Lefty Grove and Al Simmons, the core of the A's second dynasty, which captured 3 pennants from 1929 through 1931 and won 2 world championships. But while the A's won 3 straight pennants and 2 world championships, their attendance dropped. In 1929, 839,000 fans came to Shibe Park to see the Athletics. By 1931, despite 2 World Series wins in a row, only 627,000 fans filled the seats. The team was further hampered by the onset of the Great Depression. Caught in a financial pinch, Mack once again began selling off his star players to other teams. And as the attendance had dwindled after the Athletics' pennant-winning days, so did the A's prospects. Mack found himself in an unending cycle. Without the revenue to pay for top talent, in the 21 seasons between 1934 and 1954, the A's finished dead last 11 times. 3 times the team finished next to last, and only twice did the Athletics rise out of the second division. Without quality players on the field, the Athletics struggled to put fans in the seats. During that same period, the A's only finished above 6th in attendance in the American League once. That was in 1944 when the Athletics finished 4th. Philadelphia baseball fans were not paying the money to see a bad baseball team. The financial prospects of the team were probably best exemplified by the construction of the so-called spite fence in right field. When Shibe Park opened in 1909, the right field wall, which ran along North 20th Street, was 12 feet high. During the first dynasty, the neighbors who lived in houses along 20th Street would open their roofs and their bay windows up to fans so they can get a seat during the World Series. After 1929, the 20th Street neighbors erected bleachers on their roofs and charged a fraction of what a ticket price cost to Shibe Park. In 1935, with attendance dwindling, the Athletics took aim at their neighbors, who they saw as siphoning away revenue. The Athletics built a 60-foot fence in right field, blocking the view of anyone on 20th Street who tried to watch the game from the rooftops. But while a slight rise in attendance can be seen in 1936, the spite fence could not stop the A's ship from sinking. One of the key problems of the Athletics' declining fortunes was Connie Mack's inability to adapt to modern methods of recruiting new talent. Mack continued to rely on his network of friends and colleagues in order to identify talented players in the minor leagues and purchasing their contracts. This was an expensive way to run a ball club. In 1925, for example, Connie Mack paid the Baltimore Orioles of the Eastern League $100,600 for Lefty Grove's contract, which was a record at the time. Meanwhile, in 1926, Branch Rickey became the general manager of the St. Louis Cardinals. He looked for a cheaper and more efficient way of identifying and developing Major League Baseball talent. He did so by having the Cardinals organization invest in a network of minor league clubs who would supply their players only to the Cardinals instead of to the highest bidder. This was the beginning of the farm system. Mack, however, viewed this development with disdain. He derided Rickey's innovation as chain store baseball. Nonetheless, between 1926, when Rickey began working as the general manager, and 1950, when Mack retired, the Cardinals had won 9 pennants and 6 World Series compared to the Athletics' 3 pennants and 2 World Series. In fact, in the 1940s, when the A's finished last 6 times and only once rising to 4th place, the Cardinals had won 4 pennants and 3 world championships. Once Mack retired from baseball, he came to recognize his mistake. On his 92nd birthday in 1954, Mack lamented that the Athletics had not established a farm system earlier, noting that other clubs were more interested in developing their own talent rather than engaging in trades. "I guess Brant's Ricky's chain store baseball wins out after all," Connie Mack was quoted as saying. But the A's, with Mack at the helm, faced further problems. In the 1940s, with Mack in his late 70s and early 80s, his memory began to fail him. Mack would often call out players from the past, players who were long gone, when he was naming defensive replacements or pinch hitters. Now, the coaches around him would correct Mack on his mistakes, but with the A's being a close-knit family organization, nobody wanted to go up to Mr. Baseball and tell him that it was time to retire. Things eventually came to a head in 1950. That's the year Mack retired and Jimmy Dykes took over the managerial role. Just as Connie Mack was losing his faculties, infighting among his family was paralyzing business operations. Connie Mack had been married twice, his first wife, Margaret, dying at the end of the 19th century. Mack's second wife, Catherine, pressed Connie to include his daughters in the operation of his baseball team, but Mack refused. Instead, Mack began transferring shares gradually to his 3 sons. His sons from his first marriage, Roy and Earl, did not agree with his son from his second marriage, Connie Mack Jr., concerning the operation and management of the team. Roy and Earl wanted to cut costs to maximize profits, whereas Connie Mack Jr. wanted to invest in prospects to give Philadelphia baseball fans a reason to cheer for the Athletics again. This was the strategy that the Phillies pursued in the 1940s, which culminated in the Whiz Kids winning the National League pennant in 1950. In 1950, with their father retired, Roy and Earl took out a mortgage from Connecticut General and bought out the shares of Connie Mack Jr. and the rest of the Scheib family. Scheib Park was used as the collateral for that loan. But taking out a mortgage on the team at the time when attendance was still dwindling turned out to be a financial disaster. The mortgage required Roy and Earl to make annual payments of $200,000, which deprived them of the capital necessary to reinvest in the team. For example, they let the stadium further deteriorate. Roy and Earl were cutting player contracts. They fired Jimmy Dykes in favor of Eddie Yost, and they cut back on a number of minor league affiliates. Even with all these cuts and expenses, the A's found themselves unable to make the mortgage payment at the end of the 1954 season. Earl and Roy informed the American League, who began to look for buyers for the team. Connie Mack Stadium, the new name for Scheib Park, once a marvel of baseball architecture, had become dilapidated. With dwindling ticket sales, American League owners found that a road series to Philadelphia failed to generate enough revenue to cover team expenses. So the American League owners began hearing proposals from groups from Dallas and San Francisco and Kansas City. The Yankees began pushing an investment group that was headed by Arnold Johnson, a Chicago businessman, who just so happened to be the Yankees' landlord. He owned both Yankee Stadium and Blues Stadium, where the Yankees' AA farm club, the Kansas City Blues, played. Political forces within Philadelphia rallied around a proposal from local investors headed by car dealer John Crisconi. Connie Mack himself favored keeping the team in Philadelphia. The Mack family signed a contract and was ready to present the deal to the owners for legal approval. The press, however, began circulating rumors, citing unnamed sources, that the Philadelphia group was underfunded. It has been alleged that these unnamed sources came from the Yankees. Behind the scenes, Earl and Roy were experiencing conflicts with each other. Roy wanted to secure a job in the front office for himself and for his son, Connie Mack III. He was secretly negotiating a better deal for himself with Arnold Johnson before the ink on the Crisconi contract had even dried. Once Roy secured a better deal for himself, he was ready to sabotage the Crasconi deal before the meeting of the American League owners. On October 28, 1954, the Athletics presented the sale to the Crasconi Group to the owners. With a majority vote needed, the baseball world was stunned when the owners voted 4-4 on the issue of whether to approve the sale. In particular, Roy Mack voted against his own team's proposal. This was a factor that much annoyed Chicago owner Charles Comiskey Jr. American League owners eventually approved the sale to Johnson, and then approved Johnson's request to move the team to Kansas City. Once in Kansas City, it has been alleged that the Athletics essentially became a farm club for the Yankees. From 1955 through 1960, the Yankees rarely dealt with any team other than the Athletics. And this included the very lopsided trade that sent Roger Maris to the Yankees. Now, whether the Athletics could have survived in Philadelphia is a question still in doubt. The economics of baseball, indeed of the nation, were changing. Fewer cities could support two teams. In the year prior to the Athletics moving, St. Louis lost the Browns to Baltimore, and Boston lost the Braves to Milwaukee. After the A's sale, New York would lose both the Giants and the Dodgers. And in Philadelphia, things had shifted. The Phillies had become the dominant baseball team. But the city still reveres the tall tactician and his team, even honoring former Athletics on the Wall of Fame as it appeared in Veterans Stadium. To this day, a statue honoring Mr. Baseball stands outside Citizens Bank Park, reminding Philadelphia fans of a once mighty baseball franchise. Don't forget to like, click, and subscribe. Please consider becoming a patron at Patreon. Link in the description below. And we have a merch store. You can get a t-shirt like the one that I wore in today's video. We have other designs, plus mugs, phone cases, and face masks. Thank you so much for watching.